Hey guys, this is Adrian. I wanted to just talk to you this weekend and offer some thoughts. That's why Brad and Tricia are here with us. But I wanted you to know, first off, Avery and I have been talking a lot since last week, since everything kind of changed. And we are thinking of you and praying for you and with you as much as we can be in these days. We love you, and we'll get through this. That's what we're gonna talk about. So I wanted just to offer something this weekend to give you some hope, and also to give you some practical steps for how to walk through this, how to be a faithful person in these times. We talk about this a lot, but I think sometimes we can see faith as just something to help us at the end of our life, or just like head knowledge. And faith is so very practical, and it should be so practical. I get scared to think about where my marriage would be without Jesus, without my faith. I get scared to think about where I would be without Jesus and without faith. And it's scary to think about where we might be in these times without faith, without Jesus. So I wanted us to have a conversation, help you see how faith can be so practical and so crucial to helping us walk through these times. So I think hopefully most of you know this is Brad Thompson and Tricia Trimble, two of my good friends and two people as I was thinking about just kind of these anxious times that we live in, I thought of these two and the advice and wisdom that they bring. And so I wanted you to get to hear from them. And then after our conversation, we have some students, and Avery are going to join us, and we're going to have a conversation about Psalms.
I think he just called us old.
I think
Tricia,
he did too.
but
No,
that's all right.
We're not offended.
Wise.
There you go. Wisdom.
So wise. So wise. Okay, so first off, what do you think are some important things for teenagers to remember? Some important truths for teenagers to remember in these kind of crazy times that we're living in?
I think you said it really well, that our faith is practical, that it's not theoretical. And if it is theoretical, it will not sustain us through this. And these times are actually the times that test it, and not just test it, but grow it. And so faith for us grows as we see God at work, and then even look back and see how He has worked in our life. And I think one of the challenges for teenagers and our younger generations is that they don't have as much experience and opportunity to look back and see what He's done for us, through us, and all of those things. And I think it's really important for those of us who are a little older to be able to talk about all of the things that we've seen and we've lived through where we thought, man, this is overwhelming. But now we're on the other side of it. And for us to get to talk with your students and say, this too will pass. And we know that because we've seen God at work over time and through tremendous pain and hardship.
And I think the media hype, or whatever you would want to call it and refer it to, just keeps the pot stirred, and it has a tendency to set a norm, and then everyone judges. Sometimes we're guilty of, so am I on the norm? Am I above? Am I below? Am I walking right and talking right? And there's a lot of social pressure, especially for our young people today, to fit in. And sometimes in order to do that, that's very easy if you can align yourself with the kids that are on the same path as you. And then have that support system that if the rest of the world is starting to look different, you don't have to fit in. You just need to be true to yourself and to your beliefs and to what works for you, regardless of how that fits in with someone else's agenda.
You mentioned this a little bit, Tricia, and I wanted to ask you about this. So, in our 24-hour news cycle that we live in, and our students, when we all have access to the news all the time, and the news is so important in these crazy times, what advice would you give to students as we try to, in these anxious times, we try to have peace in these anxious times? What advice would you give them about the news? Like, should they watch the news all the time? Just sometimes? Like how should they interact with the news in these crazy times we're living in?
Well, I don't look forward to the news right now, but what I mean is it seems like they manage to focus on whatever is going to draw the most people to listen to and to stay on to their channel. And of course the virus that we have going around now that has impacted the entire world seems to be, every time you turn on the news, all we hear about is the panic and the dread and the negative aspects of the way we feel life should, ought, and must look. I guess it determines their ratings as to how many people they have zeroed in on, and yet there's very little positive being brought out with the news media, which I think is a downer. So I even personally try not to watch the national news, especially the one that is played 24/7 as far as their, and it is important to have updates because we are in a human crisis as far as the issues that are going on. But still, if that's all we address and all we think about and all we focus on, then we're missing the best parts of the parade that's going by that God has given us to make our days and our lives different from everybody else. Hopefully we are not the norm right now, because we do know there's hope. And He's told us in Scripture again and again, there is a season and a reason for everything that's going on. And I have put you there for a season and for a specific reason, and it's for you to live a life that is exemplary of what I created all of this for. And if we can block out the chaos in the rest of the world to focus on how we react and respond to others, it narrows everything else and puts it in God's hands as to where we go from here as far as the overall world focus right now at this time.
I would echo what Tricia's saying about really being careful about where you get your information. And it's really hard on television to get a non-editorialized version of news, but there are sources. If you're really interested in what's happening with COVID-19, then go to the CDC website, go to the State Health Department website, go to the City of Amarillo, to where you can see what's happening locally and nationally. And they're more likely to just give you the facts. And then you can do with that what you want to. Being really careful about who you're listening to has probably never been more appropriate advice than it is right now. Anytime there's a scare, people who have a vested interest in keeping the scare going are dangerous people to listen to. So I think that's a really important thing.
So y'all both are connected with students today and teenagers today, and you know these guys, and you know one of the things that I love about students today is how big they love each other, how much they care for each other, care for their friends. Their friends are just, they mean so much to them. So what advice would you give to our students as they, some of them may have friends that are really struggling with this, that feeling really anxious or isolated or scared, depressed, who knows. What advice would you give these guys as they try to love their friends in these anxious times?
I don't think there's any better time in our students' lifetime to be light. To be the light of God, the light, because that's the light of hope, right? And so now's the opportunity to really speak into that. And if you've been a person whose faith hasn't been that bold in the past. Now's an opportunity to grow in that, and to even talk to your friends about maybe now's the time that we're maturing. You know, and so we get to go from that, boy, life has been all safe for us up until this point, and now we're getting a little taste of maybe we're more fragile than we thought we were, especially as teenagers, right? Because we're invincible. So now we get an opportunity maybe to speak into that, because fear gives the opportunity to share hope. And if we don't have hope, who does?
And I think too, for a lot of, not just the kids, but our whole society puts a lot of it, Facebook, ways of communicating with masses of people at the same point in time. And that's another thing I love about our youth and our youth ministry, is the fact that they are so closely knit and connected that they are able to ooze all of that hope and just optimism, and to look for the good stuff in their little arenas of life when they do go to school and they do have social interaction. And I credit, especially here at Southwest, the emphasis that is put on our young people as, once again, you're here for a season and you're here for a reason, and you may be the closest thing to being Christ-like, and people to actually get to experience what it's like not to be driven by fear and anxiety, because you do know there's something better. There is something waiting. And a lot of families don't. They're just here and now in the moment, and it goes way beyond that.
Yeah. So for so many of us, we need, whether we like it or not, we need structure in our lives. We need routine. And so for so many of our kids, our middle school, high school students, their structure has just gone out the window in the last week. And so everything is new. So what are some healthy practices that you would encourage them to try and implement in their life to help bring about some peace and calm? What do you think are some healthy things they could do in these crazy times we're living in?
I think one of the things for most of us, our typical lives are so busy. Mm-hmm. And we catch ourselves coming and going, and maybe for the first time in some of our lives, we actually have space. And that can be anxiety producing in itself, because we're not used to having space. And so now being really practical about how do I want to fill that space. So maybe now I get to develop some spiritual disciplines. What if we took some of that space and learned how to be still? What if we took some of that space and learned to really listen for the voice of God? And did it in such a way that it's practical enough that when the pace of the world goes back to normal, which it will, we have this built into our lives, and so it continues for the rest of our journey. I think that would be a fantastic blessing that comes from this shutdown.
And I think too, to just intentionally focus on looking for the good, whether it's in the people, whether it's in your environment, whether it's in the situation. Again, like Brad said, distancing right now is the thing that is being almost mandated for us for safety reasons, which definitely makes sense. We confine our children when they've got chicken pox or any other kind of communicable disease, but this one is bringing more impactful, I guess, consequences, and yet it's kind of beyond our control, except to, like Brad said, use common sense, stay in touch with everybody, stay connected the best you can, and that's another advantage of social media, is to be able to stay in touch. But the more positive that you can relay an attitude or comments, that's going to impact your entire environment, which means everybody that's in your environment. And to look for the good, whether that be just in the weather or the time away from school, make it more of a positive thing than dreading what's around the corner tomorrow. Let's focus on what we learned yesterday, how we can implement it and use it today in order to make tomorrow better. And when God says we're done, we're finished, then that's all under His power and control.
And I would just add, be the good.
Yeah.
You know, we still have opportunities to be good neighbors, and so be the good.
Set the example. Let other people wonder why is she acting so? Everything just seems to be fine, or he's responding that didn't bother him when it bothered everybody else. And hopefully, they will see something in us as Christ followers that's going to give them hope. And I don't know how they're handling this well, but I want to be able to do that too. So even if they're just looking to each one of us individually to see why we do seem to be handling it so well and calm and not overreacting, of course we know it's because we have the hope and the reassurance that we're here for a season, here for a reason, and then we get to go back home. We're just here temporarily, and therefore we are going to have to deal with everything that's being thrown at us that doesn't necessarily fit into our agenda.
Yeah. So we've talked about this a little bit, but I want you to speak to it again. For our students, how does their faith in Jesus help them in these anxious times that we're living in?
So the text says, in the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. Is that real for you today? You know, that he has overcome all of this. None of it catches him off guard. And maybe for the first time in our lives, we're having to trust someone else for our well-being. That we can't, our parents don't know what to do. Our government doesn't exactly know what to do. So all of our safety nets are being pulled away. And what if we had to learn to depend on faith in Jesus? And how powerful that will be for the rest of your life. To go, yeah, he's got this. And now I know he has it. It's not just a theory. I know he has it because I watched him through this.
And what an example our young people can be for everybody to watch them and say, I don't know how and why you're handling this as well as you are, but I wish I had what you have. And then I hope that gives our young people an opportunity, not necessarily to preach a sermon, but to be that friend to say, hey, I am always here for you if you need me, because I know you'll be there for me if I need you. And it's that leaning into each other and feeling comfortable with that rather than fear that you're running away from something, knowing that you do have a place to run to, and you do have a safety group that you could fall into. And if our kids can give that example to the kids that they're associated with and surrounded by, for them to just even think, I don't know what you have, but I wish I had it. And our kids hopefully will just more or less not say it, but show it, well then follow me. And that's famous last words of the Messiah.
Will we live that way? Will we live that way? Or, part of my conversations that I've had over the past couple of weeks is how many of the people that are raiding the grocery stores are Christians? And what does that say about us? Do we really believe that he will take care of our food, clothing, shelter? Or in a moment of crisis, are we just like the rest of the world, hoarding to make sure we're okay? This is an opportunity for us to stand up and say, Tricia might need that milk more than I do.
Or toilet paper.
Or toilet paper. Or any number of things. And I think we spend most of our lives trying to avoid doing hard things. And the truth is, we were created to do hard. Karen and I spend a lot of time with parents who have kids with special needs. And as early as we can get to them, one of the things we tell them is, this is going to be hard. And good news, you've been created to do hard. Well, we were created for this. So let's walk into it. Not crazy, not ignorantly, but boldly, with discernment and wisdom, and courageous.
So last question, if you could go back to your teenage self and tell them one thing to help them walk through the crazy things that just happen as we go through life, to prepare them to walk through anxious times like this. If you go back to your teenage self, tell them one thing to help prepare them, equip them to walk through anxious times like this, what would you say?
Well, I was very blessed to be raised in a very small community where not only were you held accountable by everybody that lived anywhere near you, you also knew you had a safe place to go, which alleviated a lot of the anxiety. And that's what, for our kids today, to surround themselves with people that have that sense of security, that they don't have to prove themselves, to just be who you are. And if people don't like you because of that, that really is not your problem, that's their problem. So as long as you're giving everything that you have to just make sure that you're setting a good example, and then surrounding yourself by people that have that same goal, then everyone's going to be looking at you wondering again, what do you have that I don't? Why is this not bothering you? Why are you taking this so calmly? And our kids are strong enough in the faith that they'll tell them. So I'm very proud of our young people.
Awesome.
Unlike Tricia, I grew up in the big city, of Clarendon. And so the one thing I would say is that this too will pass. And that's not just true of COVID-19. That's true of the pressure you feel to measure up, like Tricia talked about. 10 years from now, that's not going to matter. Whether you fit in a particular social group in a high school, 10 years from now, it's not going to matter. If you are in the group that everybody wants to be in, 10 years from now, that will pass. It will all be different. And so are we going to anchor ourselves in the things that will pass, or are we going to anchor ourselves in the things that last?
And look for good people, good events, and good situations. And and be who you are, like Brad said.
Yeah.
Be who you are.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Brad, will you pray for us?
Yeah. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for my sister Tricia, who's taught me so much over my time here at Southwest. And Father, I thank you for these students who truly do lead the way for us in showing us what it means to live out their faith in courage and live out their faith in serving others and all of the things that they do. I thank you so much for my brother Adrian and the way he courageously leads them to a practical discipleship in Jesus. And so, Father, as we walk through these anxious times, I pray that our faith will be tested and found sufficient in managing this time so that we truly become guiding lights and a source of hope in our little communities, the small groups that we have influence over, and that we as a church will have great influence in this community for your kingdom. In Jesus I pray. Amen.
Amen.